I've been given 10 minutes to talk about that agonizing moment in the garden. Three moods appear right off the bat. One is the holy desire of Jesus to ask God the Father, and you heard about it in the dramatic reading. The holy desire to ask God the Father that if he could be spared, to take the cup away from him, but if it was God's will, it'd be done. Then there is the restlessness of man who cannot follow simple commandments like stay awake. I need you to keep watch. And the third was when he comes back to them the third time and says, rise, the hour is at hand, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed. Theologians have debated long why it had to take 3 different times of talking to these people. What was the importance of going away 3 different times to pray? If you connect the dots, the garden is always a precursor to something that is going to happen that is going to change the fate of the world. In the first garden, we had 2, and the devil intervened, and mankind's sin was born. In this garden, this man was going to take that sin that began in the first garden and ascend to a cross. So the imagining moment is basically asking ourselves some very profound questions. Why did Jesus ask those people, are you still sleeping? I think at that point he had already reached the conclusion that the frailty of this world had already been taken on his shoulders, and he need not worry that any one of these mere mortals who were accompanying him could in any way help him with what was about to happen. The second, when he said, rise, maybe, hey, the storm is about to come. It's time for you to get prepared. But as you look at the sequence of conversation, this is probably the most profound time other than on the walk to Emmaus, when Jesus talks to people in a way that they do not understand. On the road to Emmaus, after he had appeared to the disciples, they were talking to him as if he was another commoner, as if he was the only one who did not know what happened in Jerusalem. Now you have to ask yourself this question. What was so profound about the agony that at that particular moment, Jesus, who knew he was going to die, knew he was going to fulfill his Father's will, went away and asked these people, why don't you stand watch? I want to go and pray. I don't think he needed them to stand watch for any reason of protecting him. They were a legion of angels that would have come down and swooped down and saved him if he needed it. But there was something that had to happen. And this is the thing I want us to understand as we go into the Easter celebrations. The profundity of Good Friday is just this. The reason Good Friday is not good for a lot of people is the holiness of God is being diminished. The sins of man are being relinquished, and the self-aggrandizement of man are being empowered. So what happens is when you look at that equation in the garden, if you look at the contemporary setting, the people who Jesus was talking to seem to have more power than Jesus himself. It's almost as if he was asking them for permission, why are you still asleep? No, it was just a rhetorical question. He knew the answer to it. He knew why they were asleep. He knew they were asleep not because of physical fatigue. They were now still spiritually dead. And that is important to understand in the garden. The people who he asked to keep watch while he was talking to the Father were still spiritually dead. You know, Benjamin Harrison and Isaac Watts wrote some poems, but I think one of them actually classifies this moment and talks about it. Why do the nations join to slay the God's anointed Son? Why do they cast his lot away and cast his spirit down? The Lord who reigns above the sky derides their rage below and speaks with vengeance in his eyes and casts their spirits through. I called him my eternal Son. I raised him from the dead. I made my holy hill his throne and wide his kingdom spread. Ask me, my son, and then enjoy the utmost heathen land. Thy rod of iron will destroy the rebel that withstands. Be wise, ye rulers of the earth. Adore the heavenly King. Obey the King of heavenly worth and tremble at his word. With humble love address his throne. For if he frown, ye die. Those are secure and those alone who on his grace rely. Already anointed from eternity past, already promised in eternity future, from God the Father outside the realm of time. In that brief moment of captivity, the very people turned their back on the one who came as the liberator of humanity. And that's why I think it took 3 different times for us who read it to understand that every time God asks us to do something, we seem to have an excuse, and that excuse is actually spiritual slumber. That excuse is spiritual fatigue. We listen to good messages, but we can't go out into the world and keep watch. And God is saying, the frailty of humanity is still at hand. I'm about to commit the ultimate sacrifice, and you can't stand watch for 2 minutes. The question I want to ask you as we gravitate away into the rest of the service before we come back and talk about that agonizing moments on the cross and the 7 statements he gave is put yourself in that garden. Every day for the rest of your life, put yourself in the garden and ask yourself, what have you done to betray Jesus Christ's trust in you? What have you done to sink into spiritual slumber when God said, keep watch? The questions I get asked as I travel around the world is, how can I go out and be a well-meaning, believing God, created son of God or daughter of God who can go and defend him in the public space? The world is corrupt outside. And I said, the reason the world is corrupt, while our Lord is agonizing about what to do with the fate of the world, you and I are steeped and stooped in spiritual slumber. We are actually fatigued for the wrong reason. We argue with God, you don't understand, and God is saying, enough. Enough. Why do you rest? Enough. Rise. Rise because you are going to betray me. He didn't want them to rise so that they could stay watch. He wanted them to rise so they can see the storm that was about to come as the Son of Man took on the weight of the world. And the very God who sent him, his Father, turned his back as humanity went dark. That is the garden. That is the agonizing moment. It is not a precursor to something that on Sunday we come back and say, he is risen. We know he is risen. Be very careful in understanding this weekend, my friends. I haven't been to seminary. I've yet to go to cemetery, so I'm not a theologian. But this I can tell you with every fiber of my being. Easter is just an anniversary. Otherwise, he'd have to die every Friday and rise every Sunday. It was one and done. But the poignant moment in that garden when he said, rise, was rise from your spiritual slumber. Rise from your spiritual fatigue. Deliver me. I'm about to be betrayed by those of you who cannot do anything to stop it. And even though I gave you a chance to stay awake while I pleaded with the Father, you still fell asleep at that diabolical hour. When we come back later, we'll talk about the cross. Bear that in mind. Meditate. Ask yourself, is every day for the rest of your life going to be in the garden for the resurrection of the Savior, so the rest of the world can see that those that follow him are not in spiritual slumber?